Welcome to Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy, where we seek to educate, motivate, and inspire professionals into starting their own healthcare businesses. Now, please welcome your host, entrepreneur healthcare practitioner Jason Duprat.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we have Tony Renta. He is a licensed paramedic and the founder and CEO of On-Call Training Solutions. He actually spent the last 14 years in the fire service as a pre-hospital paramedic. He was the battalion chief prior to leaving that position to actually focus on growing his own successful company. So Tony created his company called On-Call Training Solutions, LLC in 2013, and his business has actually provided more than 1,000 American Heart Association courses to over 5,000 healthcare professionals. His training programs are actually taking over all of Florida, and he's becoming the number one choice provider for American Heart Association trainings. And so he's going to provide a ton of valuable information about entrepreneurship. He's going to tell about his story, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. So Tony, welcome to the show.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I usually like to get the show started off by sort of going back in time and giving the listeners sort of a glimpse into what your growing up situation was like. You know, where did you grow up? How did you grow up? Were you lower income, middle income? Sort of paint that picture for us, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I was born in Bronx, New York. When I was about 6 months old, my grandmother actually took custody of me down here in Florida. So she took custody of myself and my brother. And so I won't say we never had an issue. We never went without. But I mean, I would probably put us in the obvious low income side of things. And so it was one of those things. We didn't have the traditional mom, dad at home, or the happy married couple that was in the household. It was, a grandmother that was doing what she could to kind of try and take care of us. So it was good. It was nice to have the opportunity, to not end up in some type of system and have a family member that was willing to take me in and take my brother in and raise us from such a young age. So from that point, we moved down here to Orlando, and I was only about, at that point, 8 months old. And so grandma was mom and dad up until, she passed away about 5 years ago. So that was the normal upbringing for me.
Okay. And so you've been in Orlando for how long again?
35 years.
35 years. All right. Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Born in New York, but all I know is Orlando.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't notice that New York twang of the accent over there. I'm from Buffalo, so I know that, that Eastern New York twang that they have. Cool. So once you got to Florida, what happened once you got here? Did you land a job? Did you go to school? What was that sort of situation?
So I actually got my first job when I was 13 years old. I got tired of getting made fun of for wearing off-brand shoes. So I said, the moment I can get a job, I'm getting one. And so I ended up getting a job over on the east side of Orlando, cleaning nursing home rooms. And I did that for an entire summer. I'll never forget, I bought my very first pair of Scottie Pippen shoes. And I wore those shoes the entire year. I knew I wasn't going to get another pair, but it was like the pride and joy because I had worked my tail off to be able to get that. And from that point forward, I always carried a job. I was a child's birthday party entertainer, similar like a Chuck E. Cheese throughout high school. And then I went right into the banking right out of high school. And so I was working for South Trust Bank, which was formerly First Union, now Wachovia. So I was working for them and going to school full time. So it's always been one of those things where I held one job, if not two jobs, for probably about the last 17 years. And that's kind of what started. I had the drive, the work ethic. It kind of makes it easy when you don't grow up with a lot, very rich in love. I was always loved, had the family around me. But of course, when you don't have any dollars to your name, you find ways to make it work. And so that's where some of the drive and the hard work etiquette comes into play.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfectly good sense. I think a lot of entrepreneurs sort of, they're not brought up with everything, they sort of, a lot of them struggle along the way. And that's sort of what, just like you mentioned, it really initiates and their drive and really motivates them to sort of take things to the next level because they know how bad it could be potentially, and trying to increase their status or level from that point on. So cool. Once you were in Central Florida, then, and did you go to college in Central Florida? Where did you go to school? And
I went to Valencia, and then I went to UCF. I ended up taking a different route when I entered into the fire academy. I went through EMT school, went through paramedic school. So I finished my bachelor's in business admin. I finished it online with Waldorf College because I could have my credits from UCF transfer into them and not be set back too far. But it was more so because I had to take consecutive semesters off. So I ultimately went through Valencia. If you would have asked me in 2001, what was I going to do? I was on my track was to become an accountant, get my master's in finance, and I wanted to do forensic auditing. I'm a numbers guy. That's what I wanted to do. Somehow this entire thing catapulted. It stems from a flyer that I saw when I walked out of Valencia Community College. I saw a flyer on the wall for EMT school. I thought, I've got nothing to do this summer. Let me give it a shot. So I went through EMT school and fell in love with the job. And that kind of moved me into the next step where I worked as an EMT for about a year. I was going to UCF, and one day I came into work. I was working for a private ambulance company. I came into work, and I saw all these people saying bye to each other. And it wasn't like I'll see you next shift. This was like, I won't see you anymore. And so I asked, what are they doing? One of the guys that I actually worked with at the fire department at the time, his name's Fateh. And I said, where's he going? Oh, they got hired on with the fire department. I'm like, well, that sounds pretty cool. Where do you put your application in? So I actually put my application in, got the job within 30 days because there was a particular program that they were running and 3 individuals did not make it through EMT and were now going to start fire school. So they brought in 3 of us to go through fire school. And next thing you know, I'm a career firefighter, changing my career path altogether. Still wanted to pursue my degree, but now I was more in depth and definitely fascinated with medicine.
Okay, cool. So that's definitely a big change from forensic accounting. It's like the exact opposite. Active, a lot of work, strenuous activity versus number crunching, and what I think would be a really boring career. So that's a pretty interesting switch. What was the fire academy like when you went through that program?
It was difficult. I was a young guy. I was still working at a nightclub, and so I didn't want to give up the ability to work at the nightclub and have some type of income, additional income coming in. But it was strenuous. I had some awesome people in my class, people that I'm still friends with to this day. There's a couple guys that I definitely, I could have a conversation with, had a good time with, and we just got to know each other throughout that entire process. And so it's a brotherhood. It's an early brotherhood. You go into the fire academy and you treat the fire academy like it's the real thing. You train like it's the real thing. And, the next thing you know, you've got people that you went on, you got hired on with, and you stay friends for a lifetime. So it's an awesome experience, but what you get out of it, the intangible side of developing friendships, it's not replaceable.
Yeah, and there's probably nothing like that really. As far as maybe the military would be something sort of similar, where you have all that sort of camaraderie, where you go through the same training programs together. I mean, a lot of the firefighters do in-house 24-hour shifts. Was that you too as an EMT? Yeah. So
24 on, 48 off. So I worked for Orange County, and we did 24 on, 48 off. And so you can do a lot on your 48 hours off, but when you're with someone for 24 hours, in most situations, a firefighter is going to work 25 years. And if you put it into perspective, they're going to, by working 24 on, 48 off, they're going to give a third of their life in retrospect. Once they reach their adult years, they're likely to give about a third of their remaining life to the fire service. And so it's a big deal. These are your trusted individuals, the people you're going to lean on. They're going to see you when you get married. They're going to see you when you have kids. They're going to see people through divorces, the ups and the downs. And I mean, even if you didn't want to share your deepest, darkest secrets, you don't have a choice. I mean, at some point, you're there for 24 hours. Someone's going to pull it out of you. Yep,
exactly. And exactly. It's going to be really hard to not get to know somebody really well and develop that camaraderie for sure. You're going to see you, when you're tired, when you're stressed out in an emergency situation, when you're going to see you through all the ups and downs. So that's pretty cool. What was your sort of precipice for you leaving that sort of a position? I mean, in a lot of people's eyes, that's a phenomenal position. It pays really well. You have pension, you have great benefits. Some people would love that schedule, 2 days off every other day. What sort of launched you into wanting to leave that position?
It was difficult. It was a hard decision. I mean, it was all I had known. My career in EMS was just shy of 15 years by a few months, from private ambulance right into the fire service. And so I kind of got to a point where a decision needed to be made. And what I mean by that is I had gotten promoted. I was in a good position and, again, doing very well for myself. I can't say I wasn't happy, but within retrospect, who realistically wants to work 2 full-time jobs their entire life? Like, right, I didn't want that type of life. I would say I got an uncanny opportunity in getting promoted. I actually went from a 24 on, 48 off schedule to a 40-hour work week schedule. So try running a company early in the morning before you go into the office, late in the evening when you get out, and then on the weekends. If you have kids and you have a wife, you won't have a good relationship or a wife for long if you can't make time for them. So we really went back and forth, and I've got a supportive wife that said, you need to make a decision that's the most suitable for you and is going to make you happy. And, we went back and forth with it, and something we prayed about, and we came to a final decision that it was ready. And the opportunity was there. I had a teaching company that was growing. I had other entrepreneurial ideas that were in the works, and there was an opportunity to go ahead and ultimately close that chapter without remorse and say, you know what, I've got something else that's going on, and I'm either going to put all my effort into it or I'm not going to put any effort into it at all. So that's where we got to it. And ultimately it was, I didn't want to have to continue to work 2 jobs.
Yeah, I hear you on that. That's sort of what I've been doing too. In the past, I actually just left my full-time anesthesia job to focus on my business. Same thing as you, started it part-time, grew it part-time, and then it got to the point where it basically turned into 2 full-time jobs. And at that point, something's got to give because, it's usually when you're trying to do that, it's the family that takes the brunt of the sacrifices as you're trying to grow things. So, it's definitely followed a similar path to you. Is there any advice that you would have for anybody who is like starting a business and, they're sort of juggling those 2 things, a full-time job and
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to, everything is perspective and what you're actually going to, the final decisions you make and what you decide to do is always going to be based on what is going to make you the happiest. That we have one life to live, and in this opportunity, what are you really going to get done? And do you want to look back and say, man, I wish I would have taken that chance? Now, I don't mean be reckless. And so I would never be reckless in the sense, I know a lot of people out there, especially from the motivational speakers, the entrepreneurs, they say, follow your passion. I don't believe in it. And the reason why I don't believe in it is when you have a family and you have kids, your passion doesn't always pay the bills. So following your passion is awesome, but you got to understand the difference between a business and a hobby. Is that a hobby and that's something that you can do and it might bring a little bit of joy or plenty of joy and a little bit of income? Or is there something you need to do that's going to actually be beneficial? You're going to be happy and it's going to give you the life that you need for you and your family. And so my recommendation to anyone who's an entrepreneur who is being faced with the aspect right now of, do I pursue business 100% or do I just continue to do what I'm doing? My immediate recommendation would be, you've got to sit down, have a thorough understanding, write out your thoughts. Don't just think, just write it all out, put it on paper, and then look at whether or not the decision you're making is going to be suitable moving forward for what you want to accomplish in life. It may be, and practice the patience when you do this, because maybe you're almost there, you're not there yet. And for that very reason, maybe you do need the grit and you're going to have to maintain it for a little bit longer. But I would really go off of, my number one piece of advice would be write down all of the options, the pros and the cons, and be able to understand and recite every reason for the decision you're going to make. Don't look back, well, I didn't think about that. Be able to say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I made the decision because of this, yeah. And it's all listed out. That's the closure you get in making the decision that you make. And then hustle as much as you can.
Yeah, I love it. That's really good advice. That's actually something I did myself, is I actually wrote out the pros and cons weeks before leaving my job, because I was getting geared up for it. And that was sort of the same sort of evaluation that I did. Pros and cons, how much is the minimum amount that I can live on? Did my business meet that minimum amount? Now it's time to make that move. I know that I'm not totally happy in my full-time job. So, it was sort of a stepwise, very systematic process. I didn't, just all of a sudden one day and just, I'm out of here. There actually was some things at work that kind of helped me along to make that decision. There were some enjoyable experiences there, but I had planned this out well in advance. It was something I was getting ready to do and had prepared to do. So your advice is right on point. I totally agree with that. Yeah. So was this business your first business you started, or did you have any other entrepreneurial sort of startup things going on in the past?
I did actually. When I was working in the nightclub industry, I actually started a clothing store with a buddy of mine, and everything that I've ever done has always been geared towards concierge service. And so we had started this clothing company, and we were doing ultimately a concierge service. We would only order a few sizes of any individual item, so that if you were wearing it, you were the only person wearing it, and that was the gear. It was the concierge side to it of buying exclusive clothing. I think it was something. It was a fad. It was something that we both were happy doing in the interim while we were still working in the nightclub industry, but it kind of faded out. Just wasn't something we wanted to stick with. So we moved into the next aspect, and when we moved into the next aspect, it was okay. We closed that door, and I started basically doing the teaching side. I almost replaced my second job, if you will, with the teaching aspect instead, and that was when On Call Training Solutions was born.
Okay. What was the process like when it came to getting geared up and getting that business up and running? On Call Training Solutions, what was all involved with that? Some of our listeners have never started a business before, and then some have had multiple businesses. So for the beginner, like what's sort of the things that you need to keep in mind as you're getting ready to open the doors and get things up?
Gotcha. So I'm a huge proponent that you never go into debt. I get that there's some, but with a small business, I really do feel like you should be able to save most of the capital yourself to avoid, because we are creatures of instant gratification. And it sucks when your first paycheck goes back into debt that you incurred over starting the company. When you don't have that instant gratification, it's hard to get motivated to get up and continue to operate in the red. Right? Nobody wants to do that. So ultimately, my recommendation would be to fund everything that you possibly can from your normal income on a regular basis. Fund everything that you can, and start with obviously the legal side, establishing the business, doing everything through your local agencies to ensure that your licenses are appropriate. And then whatever you're going to do, my focus and my expertise is in the American Heart Association courses. But American Heart Association has guidelines. And so I had to read over their equipment list and their guidelines for licensure and what they require, and ultimately have that all up and running. And my recommendation, again, would be figure out every single thing that is a fixed cost that needs to be paid for. Figure out how you're going to fund that. Hopefully you're working, you're saving some of the capital, and you can do it on your own. And then be able to launch it as a debt-free company from day one.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of doing things debt-free whenever possible, for sure, especially a brand new startup, because there's a lot of risk to starting up. Some people just don't have the grit and the skill set to really run a successful business. So there's a chance you'll fail. Actually, quite a few businesses fail. I think, what are the stats? Like 80 or 90% fail in the first 5 years. So I would recommend, if this is your first business and you're starting from scratch, just like Tony does, to not do it based on debt, because that could be something you'll be digging yourself out of for a long time in the future. Also, I think that somebody should have a nice emergency fund in their account. Mm-hmm. So that way, if things aren't going so well in the business, they have something to fall back onto. They don't have to immediately jump back into their job and give up because they didn't save enough capital to survive for several weeks or hopefully months or maybe even years as the business is growing. So,
absolutely. Yep. I mean, and some of the biggest entrepreneurs out there, what is their recommendation? Work your 2 jobs and really hustle on the side job until the side job makes more money than the main job does. But that means that you've appropriately planned it. I mean, the same way you would save 6 months worth of, your expenses for your household, you should save 6 months worth of your expenses for your business, for exactly what you said, Jason. Something happens, you don't want to have to say, all right, time to close up shop. I need to go back and find a 40-hour work week job or whatever the case may be. It's got to be, okay, well, we'll weather the storm. We're going to be all right until things bounce back, and then, we'll go from there. We'll carry on.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, great advice. So as you were growing this company, what were some of the challenges you were facing? Because now it's gotten pretty big. You have a lot of instructors. You're all over Central Florida and still expanding out even further than that. So what's some of your advice as you're going from just starting up to starting to scale and hire people?
So customer service is going to be number one. I think there's not going to be any form of entrepreneurial business that doesn't require customer service. Listen to your customer, solve a problem, and then get paid to do it. And that's realistically what has to happen in almost every business. Almost every business, if you think about it, you're solving a problem. What exactly is going on? How can I solve that problem? and how can I monetize solving that problem? Again, that's something that people have to do in order to make it. Now, when you go through some of the challenges, in my personal opinion, one of the worst challenges I would have to say that I've seen, and it's sad to say, is you have a lot of people out there that want you to succeed, but no one wants to push a dime out to see you succeed. And what I mean by that is you might have a product that generally works directly and is a necessity to people you know, but they'll never call you as one of the vendors that they need because they want you to be successful, but they don't want to help you get there. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I could say is don't get your feelings hurt. You're going to have to do it on your own. And when people say you can't make it work, make it work. When they say that you can't monopolize something, monopolize something. And when they say it's not going to get the job done, get the job done, because no one's going to hand you a thing. And I'm not saying every person is like that, but I noticed very quickly there were probably a great abundance of people that could use my services that I would think would call me for my services, but never picked up the phone once. And so I would say, don't expect anything and be willing to work for everything.
Yeah, and listening to your customer was, listening to your customer is one really important thing that you had briefly touched on too. Like your customer has a need, a problem, a desire, and you have to solve that for them. And then along the way, you should be continuously getting feedback. So that way you are the best at solving the problem, because there's a million other people in most cases solving that problem around the US. What makes you sort of stand out? Why are you better? And usually that's going to be a direct result of you listening to your customer and then implementing the changes that your customers are asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always going to be a huge challenge. I think people get they get complacent, and customer service needs to stay at the top of your food chain. You need to take care of your customers, right? Because they're the only ways that pay bills. And a lot of people say, well, put the employees first. I'm not disagreeing that the employees and the people that work with you and alongside with you, I call everybody a member of my team. I don't look at it as anyone works for me. We all work together. But ultimately, if customers don't pay, nobody has a job. So you got to make the customer happy, and then you make the team happy. And that's just the easiest way to do things. But one of the biggest challenges is maintaining customer service, because I don't think people really do. I think people let customer service go to the wayside. They get a little bit of money in their pocket and things look good, and they start forgetting the grassroots of what got them where they were. So I'd say the biggest challenge is maintaining customer service at all times.
Mm-hmm. What are some things that you're doing sort of in your business to help with the customer service? I mean, I've called some different businesses before. They don't even answer the stinking phone. It's like, so some of this stuff is just so basic, like answer your phone, return a phone call, reply to an email.
Yeah.
What are some
I would
things?
say that I'll get smacked for saying, but that is actually my downfall, and I'm going to reverse it. My downfall is my phone is glued to me. I wish it wasn't. I try to take as much time away from it, but if there's one thing no one can say is that they're not able to get a hold of me, whether it's via Facebook Messenger, through our company site, text message, phone call. We reply to everyone generally in less than an hour on the same day. So I've got, a lot of times and it can only stay that way for so long. The bigger we get, the more difficult it's going to be. And that's where someone's going to almost be on call trying to get these phone calls handled. But right now we're at a point where I make sure that every single phone call is done. I mean, for 6 years now, I have not let the customer service side lapse, because there's a very big difference in that aspect. Every time you don't answer the phone, you don't reply to a text message, what are you likely going to do? That consumer is going to hit Google again, and they're going to find another option. And if that option answers the phone, you just lost a prospect that could open doors that you'd never even know. You may have just ignored the phone call from a director of a multi-million-dollar location that was thinking about bringing you in for permanence. And now it's like, well, man, I missed that phone call. Can I have a redo? Can I have another?
Right. Yeah. That's super good advice. Well, I actually had an experience with a company that I was testing out for live interviewing software for my company, and it was unbelievable. I filled out a form online and to ask a question. Within 3 minutes, I had a phone call with a super nice representative on the phone asking me what what I was looking to use the software for, I was like, wow, this is like super impressive, because if they didn't call me within that next 3 minutes, I was going to do exactly what you said. Go to the next Google site and fill out their form. And then whoever, people are creatures of, trying to get things done quick and efficiently and doing the easiest thing. So, typically it's the first person that calls you that sounds reasonable, they're going to do business with. So, yeah.
And here's the thing. Small businesses are not Nike. You don't have the brand to just ignore phone calls.
Yep.
You just don't have it. So you either build the brand and always be a local business until you can scale to where you want to be. You need to be a dominant local business. And the only way you can do that is to brand yourself and be branded within your local area. As time grows and you scale, that's great. But you don't start off as Nike. Nike doesn't have to answer the phone all the time. Why? Because they're Nike. But you're not going to have that benefit. You've got to answer the phone, reply. That customer service is going to go a long way, because, again, that one phone call you ignore or you don't reply to might be an open door that you just closed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on you.
Yep. Great points. So when it comes to, I know now you have a lot of staff. So now you have to interview, hire, find the right staff. What's your sort of advice for anybody doing that?
So one of the things that generally people would frown against is using people that are kind of in your circle that are friends. Ultimately, a lot of the people that are working with me are all friends of mine. I think it's a little bit of both sides. It's very, very specific, but the individuals that are working with me are all generally friends that are trustworthy. So the process is generally to have a conversation with them, and we have a few that weren't really specific friends in the early stages, but the main purpose is to have a conversation and set the expectation. I think one of the biggest issues, especially from a leadership standpoint, is unspoken expectations, right? I know what I was thinking I wanted you to do, but I didn't say what I wanted you to do, but now I want to hold you responsible for what I never told you to do. It's a horrible, horrible stigma in business, in the private and the public sector. You have got to set the expectation. So when you're going to hire someone, have a conversation, get to know them. Find out about some of their hardships without being too personal, right? Because my company's on-call training solutions. I don't want to have someone working with me that I don't necessarily need to be on call, but I need them at a moment's notice from time to time, who, based on their hardships and their family dynamics, this is a zero option, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we can't be friends. It just means you're not right for my spot, for what I need. But it all starts with a conversation and a setting of expectations of what you're going to be doing. Hey, this is how we function here. This is what we do. This is the chain of command. This is the way we communicate. When you have a problem, this is what I expect you to do. And you got to set those expectations. When you set them, you can hold them accountable. You don't set them, it's going to be impossible. The other side to it is you're going to get good people. You're going to get good employees, good team members, right? Because they're not going to get committed and get involved with you with any blind side. You already set the expectation. They know exactly what's going to be expected from them day one. So they're either going to say, look, that's too much, I can't do that. Or they're going to say, sounds reasonable, let's go.
Yeah, I love it. Definitely set the expectation, because things can fall apart quickly if you don't do that. And there'd be all sorts of, I'm sort of guilty of that myself, sort of thinking everything through my head and then just sort of assuming that somebody miraculously can read my thoughts, which is kind of crazy. That we do that, but yeah, it's something you just have to be aware of and verbalize. It's like that saying where you can't over communicate. So that's sort of the same sort of thing applies right here. So definitely,
it's one of those things. I mean, one of my buddies, one of my second in command within my company, ultimately Matt. That's one of the things he always says is I can't put my brain on paper. So if I need something, I got to be able to say it, or what my train of thought is, or what the direction is. Because it's going a mile a minute. As an entrepreneur, everything it's all processing here, but I gotta be able to communicate that and put that on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So now that you've sort of scaled and you've sort of taken over Central Florida when it comes to American Heart Association training, what sort of advice would you have when it comes to seeking out new clients? Because you've done a phenomenal job of that. You've got clients all over Central Florida. So how do you approach people? How do you find potential clients? And then how do you ultimately close the deal and get them to use your company?
So we typically will look into the different hospital systems and what people are doing. We'll use social media to our advantage. And Of course, the number one referral, the number one benefit, I guess you could say, or the highest a compliment you can receive is a referral. So once you have someone, you've got to be, you have to have the humility to just say, look, would you mind referring me out? Would you mind passing my info in? Because that's going to be the easiest, cost-effective way to get another client, is for someone to just simply pass your number on. A buddy of mine, Kyle, gave me a little piece of advice. He doesn't give out a lot of business cards, and he doesn't give out those business cards simply because it's a lot easier for him to take your number down and call you than to give you a business card that's just going to end up at the bottom of one of your desk drawers and you'll never use it. And so it's one of those things where I take some of that. I leave my business card with some of our top, points of contact, but nonetheless, I already know them on a first name basis. I keep I keep their information stored, and I have a full dialogue with them on a regular basis. But when it actually comes to procuring new clients, it really goes off of the word of mouth and then just trying to have an active relationship with some key players. So research is really where you got to go. Who's in charge of what? How can you meet them? What networking events are going on in your area? What can you do to sit down with the right people and have the personality for them to not shut the door on you and instead at least entertain, one of the first words. And the other aspect is that sometimes you're just going to have to give a little away for free. If nobody knows who you are, what's the point of them paying you for anything, right? You may have to do something that's free of charge and just say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. I'm going to make it free of charge simply because it's the only way I can get my foot in the door. One of the biggest companies I was able to get myself in the door with started off with a 10-minute interview. And after the 10-minute interview, it started off with a free class. And now I'm their primary vendor for now 6 years. So it all goes off of research the right people to sit down with, have the personality to land the deal, and then by any means necessary, close that deal. Even if it means you have to do something free of charge today for it to pay dividends, years down the line.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And that one thing that you mentioned there was finding the right person to get in front of. What are your tips for doing that? Because if you're not talking to the decision maker, you're just wasting your time. You really got to get in front of those people that can make the decisions, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that's probably one of the easiest to do is a simple handwritten card to that individual. If you know who they are, sending them over something that just gives their information. I kind of call it planting seeds. Put your card out there, put your information out there, and see what happens with it. The other aspect is networking events. If you see that somebody that is impressionable is speaking at a particular event, why not buy a ticket and attend? Yep. You might as well give it a shot. You might be meeting someone that you otherwise will never get a meeting with. You will never sit in front of them. But this may be the opportunity where you get to see what they do. You get to talk to them. You get to see them, provide some type of keynote speech, whatever the case may be. Now you have the opportunity to sit in front of them. And the last aspect is, what do you have to lose? What's the worst thing that's going to be said to you? No thanks? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The worst thing is to never get the no thanks and instead just wonder what would have been said had you approached that individual. So research the top people, see if there's any events that they're doing that you can hopefully, at least get, a handshake in, hand your card over, or whatever the case may be, and ask. The worst thing that can ever be said to you is no.
Yeah, that's phenomenal advice. And the same sort of thing applies to somebody that you're sort of looking up to or want to learn from, or maybe bounce ideas off of or have as a mentor. That's some of the things that I've done before. I've paid hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars to get in front of people that know what they're doing, that have the experience, that are doing what I want to do. So that way we can make a connection, and it's paid off big time. Sometimes you just have to pay a little bit to get a seat at the table, to get that introduction. And then, down the road, it's, hands down, totally worth the upfront investment for sure.
Absolutely.
So we have a question from one of the viewers. So we'll circle back real quick to hiring. And so Troy's asking, when you're looking at resumes for different employees for your company, what are you mostly looking at? Are you looking at like degrees, GPAs? Are you looking at references? Or are you using, sort of a value system as your primary driver for who you're going to hire?
So to me, one of the first things that I would ever look at is the work experience. And the reason why I say that is I like to see longevity. I like to see that you've spent some time somewhere, then that you can stay committed to it. Now, there's extenuating circumstances, but here's the thing. GPA is not, it's great, but we all know that you might be the smartest book person, but I can't give you any direction without you coming back and asking me for step by step, right? So I love the 4.0, but if you can't function without me telling you what to do, you're kind of irrelevant to me. I want to see that you're a problem solver and you have you know how to deviate an objective, figure out whatever this problem is and solve it, right? Oftentimes even my assistant, she'll call me and she'll ask me a question and I'll reply and say, make a decision. Just make a decision. Figure it out. So when I'm looking at someone's resume, I want to see what exactly did they do and for what period of time, right? What were you tasked with doing? Were you a follower? Were you a leader? Were you making decisions? And then I like to ask a few questions. If I have to interview someone, I want to ask you a question in regard to possibly like more of a scenario of hypothetically, what would you do in this case? And I like to be able to see that somebody can actually think on their feet and make a suitable decision. So a resume is an outline for what they did, but it should never supersede the questions that you ask, because what are you looking for? Ethics, moral value? No one puts ethical and moral value as a little category on their resume, right? Everyone is very busy boasting about everything they've done. These awards, these companies, this time, this GPA, this college, this charity. I want to know about your moral and your ethical value and how you problem solve so that you are a leader for me, not a problem for me.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So I kind of want to shift gears here a little bit because we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I want to maximize this. We could probably go on for hours talking to you. But real quick, I just want to tell everybody that if you're looking for training, if you're in the medical space or if you have any sort of medical employees that need, you do ACLS, BLS, PALS, you do, you also do a stroke certification, ASLS, right?
Yep.
Cool. So you can check out Tony and his company at oncalltrainingsolutions.com.
Yep.
So cool. I wanted to transition now to, if you don't mind, your new stethoscope product, the Ampliscope. Yep. And sort of what was why did you want to start that project? Doing a physical product is sometimes a lot more challenging than a service company. So
yeah. So I was at the hospital with, we had just had my second child, and my wife and the baby were doing great, and they actually laid down for a little bit. So I went downstairs and I just saw that every person walking around the hospital had a stethoscope. And I thought to myself, it really doesn't make any sense that you can't have a universal stethoscope, right? So I got to thinking, my wife and I started doing a little research, and I started looking into all the different stethoscopes out there and the manufacturers and things like that. And I realized that there was no one that had created an integrated speaker on a stethoscope. And so from a consumer standpoint, an educational standpoint, a diagnostic tool, we typically use the stethoscope. And if we're educating someone, we listen, and then we ask someone to go ahead and ultimately put the stethoscope on. Hey, here, this is what I hear. I'm trying to teach you. Go ahead and put this on so you can hear what I'm hearing. But I don't get the actual opportunity to say it like directly as it's happening. So we started doing some research. I visited with an attorney. We did a patent search, and we did some searching to see if it existed. And the Ampliscope was born. So we patented a handheld integrated speaker in a stethoscope. So in essence, it removes the tubing.
Mm-hmm. That's a super cool idea. I remember being in nursing school and doing my clinical rotations, and the nursing instructor, the clinical instructor, would have a dual earpiece stethoscope, and she would be like, "Oh yeah, do you hear S1 and S2?" And I had never listened to I never knew what like a real S1 and S2 sounded like. And she was trying to tell me what it was. And I didn't even think I was hearing anything that she was hearing. So this is like such a cool idea that you can just literally place it on, place it on their chest. And
yeah, you place it on chest, hold the same type of pressure, but instead the actual lung sounds will be protruded through the integrated speaker. So instead of you actually having tubing and waiting, it's coming right through the speaker. So we received the patent on it in September of 17. So we're in our second year. We've got prototypes. We did the electrical and mechanical engineering. We just finished the website. So we're having a couple little kinks with the prototype, the electrical side. We're going to get back to tweaking what we need as far as that side of it, and then hopefully get to a final product, a final prototype that we can start to possibly manufacture.
Cool. That's really exciting. What does the process look like when you're trying to find patent lawyers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers? Where do you find these people? Do you outsource a
Google, man,
third-party
it's
company?
impossible. You literally are Googling all the time, sending emails, asking questions. Everything costs money. Someone to have a conversation with you wants to be paid an exponential amount of money. So ultimately, you're going to have to do a lot of research on your own. I actually grabbed a journal. When we checked out of the hospital, I swung by CVS, bought a little red journal, and wrote all my thoughts, all my ideas, my research, everything in that journal. Still have it to this day with the things that I hurried up, put into paper, so that I could then start the process. But it was ultimately a matter of Google electrical engineer in your city and then look into it, and Google mechanical engineer in your city, look into it. Google patent attorney, look at the reviews and see whether or not this is an attorney that you want to collaborate with, and then move from there. But it's a process.
Yeah,
It's a process.
sounds like it. What does the actual patent process look like, and how much does it cost if you use an attorney to work through that process? Do you have patent pending, or do you have patent?
Oh, no, I got a full patent. We have a full
patent.
patent that was issued. We're on the U.S. Patent Association or Office database website. And so it probably took us, I'd say the attorney side of it was roughly about $10,000 to $12,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pricey.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So that's a pretty interesting story. Any sort of challenges or advice you'd give to anybody who has like a product idea and they're thinking about?
I just had a conversation with someone who called me yesterday to get a little consulting about what they're doing. And it turns out they've had like 9 conversations with people about their product. And I'm like, did you sign any non-disclosures? No. Did you go visit an attorney and at least get in the process so that you're patent pending? No. What are you doing? So keep it quiet. I know it's hard. It's an idea and you're like, I just want to tell everybody about it. Keep it quiet. Keep it to yourself. Protect yourself. And once you've protected yourself, then you can have conversations about it. That's probably one of the biggest challenges. I love to talk. I don't have a problem having a conversation, as you could probably see here. So when I had this idea, I was just bursting, wanting to tell people about what I was doing, and I stayed real quiet. To a lot of people that I know pretty well, were like, when did this happen? Because, of course, I had some type of Facebook announcement. Once the patent was issued, I was done. It was like, wow, I can't believe you did this. How long have you been doing this? Oh, just about 3 years. And it's like, well, I didn't have to keep the secret the entire time, but the process was very lengthy. And until you're in that process, you want to stay kind of quiet.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for giving us a little insight on that. When it comes to your plan for marketing, once everything's up and running and you get that little kink worked out, what's your plan to scale this up, get some sales? Do you have a plan in place right now, or?
No, I mean, it's so far ahead of me right now. I need to get to the point. I mean, I'll likely move towards some type of investor at that point, because it's just so difficult to get it all done, and really to have that prototype done, ready to go, and be thinking about how we would e-commerce it, distribution. I don't have any experience there. So that's where I'm going to start looking towards mentors and people that have done it before and try and collaborate with them, because it's not something that I'm familiar with. And so I keep looking at it and almost wanting to delay it because it's something that I'm going to have to learn a little bit about. Yeah,
for sure. I'm definitely certain that that's going to be a big challenge, but something you can totally do. You're crushing it. So yeah, because you'll have to find a manufacturer, maybe China, maybe some other country. You have to go inspect factories, or
absolutely
a lot of steps involved in that, getting that first prototype done, and then the final manufacturing all organized. So cool. I applaud you for.
I'm wise enough to know I don't know it all. So I'll have to learn along the way, and I'll have to have the right people in place helping me.
Yeah, and just like you mentioned, like mentors are so important. So there's all sorts of different places where you can go to connect with people that have done what you want to do, and it's like it might cost you a little money to get in front of them, but it's totally worth it because they're going to save you a bunch of time, money, mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So we're sort of winding things down here because we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a busy guy. So is there any sort of like parting words of advice that you have for anybody? Any sort of books that you recommend, podcasts, anything like that?
So I read a book a couple years ago called The E-Myth Revisited. It is a book that my wife gave me, and it talks a little bit about being in the infant stage and being in the starting a company and recognizing you have to do a lot of the work, and you have to wear many of the hats, and then it's knowing when to separate from that aspect. That's one of the biggest things, is knowing when to start delegating the work out instead of trying to consistently do it all by yourself. It's very difficult. So one of the things that I would always recommend to somebody is realistically put in the time and effort and make sure that you are, within essence, utilizing everything around you as far as your resources, because if you try to juggle all of it, you are going to remain stagnant. You have got to, in the beginning, you don't have a choice, but at some point, you're going to have to realize, I just can't do it all. And how am I going to make it work? That's when you start bringing more people on. It might mean you see less of the profits, but if it's a necessity, it's a necessity. And then the other aspect of it is remain positive about it. I've got a friend here, that locally does a big deal when it comes to, the positivity. His name's Keith, and he's got this gig called the Win It Minute. And he's all over social media. He's got a really nice following, but in essence, he's constantly got a positive mindset to what he's doing. And that's what I see being a huge benefit. As I try to kind of adapt some of that positivity, that no matter what roadblock I get, I'm going to hop over that roadblock, and I'm going to continue to do whatever's necessary to succeed. And I'm going to remain positive. I'm going to see every single thing as a learning experience. I'm going to fall down. I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to hit a roadblock. I'm going to reroute, and I'm going to remain positive. Because if I'm positive, the team is positive. Those that are following me are positive, and those that associate with me are positive, right? So you want to make sure that you're a leading light, not a dimming light.
Yes, awesome. I love it. You are wise beyond your years for sure. Some really good advice. Staying resilient, staying positive for sure is essential to being a good entrepreneur and getting through any of the tough times.
Absolutely.
I really want to thank you for your time. I totally appreciate you jumping on here with us and giving a little glimpse into your journey and some advice for everybody. Definitely valuable information there. If anybody's interested, like we mentioned before, in any BLS, ACLS, PALS, or ASLS training, Tony's your guy. OnCallTrainingSolutions.com. And then if you want to learn a little bit about his amploscope stethoscope, it's theamploscope.com. I was on that website this morning, so it's a pretty cool device. I think you guys will be pretty impressed with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again, Tony. Really appreciate you
having me on the show, man. I really do. What you're doing is awesome. Reaching out to the world of entrepreneurs out there, letting people see that there's something beyond what the monotony of what they're used to day to day. And if you got an idea, you got a thought, you got something you can succeed with, never ever leave it on the table as what if. If you have to collaborate with someone else and create joint partnerships or whatever the case may be, do whatever's necessary to be successful. And once you get good at it and you keep pushing and stay positive, you're going to be all right.